Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Season 4 on the Digital Adoption Show. It is your go-to podcast for cutting-edge insights and innovative strategies in today's dynamic work environment. I'm your host, Nabras Mohammed, Business Development Leader for Asia Pacific at Whatfix. And today, we will explore top 5 digital transformation insights that help you scale innovation and customer experience across organizations. To discuss the same, we have a great guest on our podcast, Ivkovic, currently serving as a CIO at ISS, a leading company in workplace experience and facility management. He's a seasoned professional whose career has crisscrossed the globe, right? With over 20 years under his belt in IT, automotive, and logistics, Zeljko's journey from his birthplace in Croatia to Germany, to Japan, China, and now in Singapore is a testament to his adaptability and drive. He's not just a tech expert, he's a leader who knows how to bridge the gap between different cultures and industries, steering projects and teams to success. Now with ISS in Singapore, Zeljko is pioneering efforts to digitize and automate the facility management sector. This new chapter not only highlights his ongoing quest for innovation, but also his commitment to foster a culture that thrives on diversity and ingenuity. As we chat with Zeljko today, we will uncover the insights that he has gained from his extensive career and explore the exciting potential he sees in transforming traditional industries through technologies. Welcome to the podcast, Zeljko.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So Zeljko, before we dive into the main discussion, let's kick off our episode with our segment, the Digital Pulse, right? This is where we try to connect the dots between the passion and the profession, uncovering how individual journeys shape visionary leadership. So Zeljko, is there a passion or activity outside of work that's particularly close to your heart?
So activity outside of work, for me specifically here in Singapore, new country, new environment, I think my family is one of the major anchors that I have, and something really helps me to stay grounded because, I mean, you can imagine with a new position, with a new role, the whole thing is pretty busy. Trying to stay on top of things, it requires really the best of you. So yeah, I try to spend as much time as possible, which is obviously as well limited, with my family in my free time. And in Singapore as well, with the local attractions that we have many possibilities with the close by countries for travel and other activities. So yeah, for me, family is.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can only imagine. I've never lived outside of India. Like I said, your next destination should be India.
Who knows? Yeah.
And fantastic. So moving on to the real reason why we are doing this podcast, Zeljko. Now that you're warmed up, we should actually begin the questions around the theme for this episode, right? So, Zeljko, to start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and at the ISS?
All right. Yeah, first of all, again, thanks a lot for having me, Mohammed. So about myself, I'm 48 years old. I'm Croatian. I've never lived in Croatia, but I was born in Germany. I have now an extensive experience, I think, of over 20 years living in Asia. I've started the whole thing right after my studies with an internship in Japan, where I've spent then eventually 6.5 years. Previously, I planned already to stay there for 6 months, but I got so excited and interested in the country and in general about Asia, that I decided to stay. So at that time, I was still with the Bosch Group, so more specifically ETAS, which is in the automotive area. I really loved the country. I learned the Japanese language. This somehow got me stuck with Asia for a longer period, simply the interest, the curiosity. And very much still, I learned so much about the culture that also impacted me, I believe, in many ways, that I simply decided to stay longer. After 6.5 years in Japan, I have then moved for the same company, for ETAS, to China, Shanghai, because we have been growing. I was responsible for Asia Pacific for the IT. China was the only country that was significantly growing at that time. And I moved at that time to China to continue the journey there as well, running Asia Pacific for ETAS within the Bosch building at that time. And at the same time, when I arrived in Shanghai, started an MBA. I have stayed there then for another 4 years. I moved within the Bosch Group to the M&A section, did some consulting, project management. We also had topics like intercontinental mergers, joint ventures. I did interim management for these different companies. So especially if you merge companies or if you divest companies, there is this kind of vacuum in between. So that was the part where I believe as well I've learned most, especially cross-functional. So it was not such a pure role anymore, but rather something where I had lots of insight as well in different functions, different departments that helped me as well to combine it with the knowledge that I also obtained during the MBA studies in Shanghai. Having stayed there, at some point, I decided to make a move. So together with the background then with an MBA, I tried to really like step out a bit of my comfort zone, take over another role. I had then the opportunity, I took another role with Deutsche Bahn Schenker. So that was a GM, a general management role for the Technology Solution Center. So it was a role reporting to global. We had 600 people at the Technology Solution Center. I was staying there for 5 years. And it was really a very, very different kind of like a ball game with running a whole location and also being responsible not only for IT, obviously, but for the marketing piece, the sales piece, and all these kind of different departments where I learned heaps of stuff that really helped me as well further on in my journey, in my career. After 5 years in my role as a GM, I was then offered within Deutsche Bahn Schenker as well the CIO role for Greater China. So it was my first CIO role heading mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And I stayed there for 2.5 years in the CIO role. Also during the whole COVID wave that was actually happening. So I literally jumped into the role, COVID hits, and it was a bit special as well in China with the whole lockdowns and everything, which then eventually after 2.5 years in the role, I had to make the tough decision for our family as well to move out of China. We had the opportunity then, that's where I found the role with ISS, to move then from China to Singapore roughly 10 months ago. And ever since I am with ISS, and we're still running high, running wild with ISS. Great opportunity, lots of stuff to do, and such a different kind of environment. Because as I mentioned before, I was starting my career in the automotive area. Then I moved into the transport sector, and now I'm in the facility management area, which is a very different industry. Also speaking of, for example, margins. So we have in the automotive industry, basically low margin business, similar to transport industry, but then basically facility management again is a very traditional kind of business, especially with ISS. And here as well, the challenges are very, very different. We still have so many opportunities to create and to increase the maturity of our digital landscape within ISS. And that's the exciting piece, and the exciting part, the reason why I actually really found it so interesting to join ISS on this journey to become the tech leader in the industry.
Fantastic. I mean, the kind of travel that you've had, different regions, different countries, different roles, it's just amazing. Zeljko, the next question that I have, I think I won't find a better person to ask this question, right? Actually, with the kind of background that you have and the scaling, the innovation across different industries that you have worked in, right? Can you share your top insights on integrating digital transformation initiatives across different corporate culture and geographical regions, right? You've had experiences in multiple regions also. So how is it different? Can you tell us more about it?
I think the word digital always comes a bit like together with tech and machines and with the tech solutions. But what's much, much more important is the whole people piece to it, right? So if you're running a digital transformation, it's much more about influencing a whole organization. And you can imagine that the whole thing is changing depending on the industry, depending on the size of the organization. Is it a very streamlined? Is it a tech company, for example? Do we have like many different departments? Who are the decision makers? So that piece was something that I really had to learn the hard way in the past, expecting you have a template, you have a workshop, the whole thing runs by itself, right? So, and it was a very different kind of perspective that I had to learn. So as I mentioned, it's not only an IT job, but it's much more about facilitation, about communicating, being an influencer in the whole story. Because you need, in the end, you have to manage people, you have to manage relationships, you need to influence, you have to market something, right? So the marketing piece I would have never seen in the past in such a kind of like a role to bring it forward, right? Because you will always, in any kind of environment, you will always also experience resistance. It's not going to be that you go into something, you define a certain goal, and then have only followers around you, right? So it's really something where you have many opportunities, but also many challenges to get everyone on the boat, to support, to be part of the whole transformation journey. And as mentioned, digital transformation comes obviously as well with a certain set of kind of goals that you have. You have these tangible goals in terms of what you want to achieve. For example, like what are the customer needs there, right? So for us, it's very, very important to be customer centric and at the same time have this win-win approach between ISS and the customer to really find the right approach for both sides to work together, to partner up and have a long-term relationship rather than having something you throw over the fence. It works, it doesn't work, we don't care afterwards. But it's really very much about like a collaborative approach, something that works and works in the long term.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we preach in Whatfix also, that transformation is not just about the technology, right? It's about the people, and how you influence the people is something which is very important. You also touched about the customer satisfaction and that experience, the long-term relationship that you have to build, right? So on that topic, with the customer experience at the heart of digital transformation, what innovative approach or strategy have you found most effective in aligning IT infrastructure or operations to enhance the customer interactions and satisfaction?
Yes, there is no single one answer, I think, right? So, especially looking at Asia Pacific right now. So, we have these high cost countries, we have low cost countries, we have different possibilities, different leverage systems that we can use. Obviously, one thing is omni-channel support, right? So that we have different kind of like ways to communicate with our customer base, with our partners. They also go out and understand, listen in. It's not just, for example, what is often confused to think, to know the solution, but rather ask where the problems are. So the majority usually to a problem is 95% or so is really defining the problem. And the more clear the problem is, the easier it is. That's the 5% that I'm referring to, will be the solution. So it's more or less like if you are very aware, very clear where the pain points are for the customers, I think it's much easier to find a satisfying answer or solution than if you're trying to guess and bring something forward just because it's hyped on the market at the moment, right? So you have similar, for example, like experiences right now with these large language models that are super hyped. It's super useful, right? But you need to find the right use cases, not just like, hey, I'm part of the gang that is on the train right now, but really to have proper use cases that benefit. We have cloud-based solutions that we offer, especially for the scalability and the flexibility to ensure that the IT infrastructure can adapt to the changing customer demands, the business requirements. And together with this also comes cybersecurity, to invest there, to have a safe and stable environment. Because I mean, you have these kind of things with all the damage that's being done with cybersecurity nowadays, especially with AI playing a role in having these big threats that are happening. You need to be more cautious, and that's also a big value proposition that ISS brings forward to the table, to have a very big team, probably the biggest team in the industry for security, because it's one of our major focus points to offer cyber secure solutions. We're not just like anything that's working out of sight.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, like you said, once you have identified the problem to solve, right? And there are a lot of different technology solutions available out there in the market. It has seen like massive advancements over the last few years. How do you prioritize which digital innovations to implement for the operational excellence and the customer service improvement for your organization?
Strategy. And strategy is really a stretch word, right? So it's all about the business goals. And business goals goes both ways. This is not what's in for ISS. It's in, that's what I mentioned before as well. It's like this win-win, this partnership between customer and ISS to really find the right strategic fit for us, right? So we have to find as well the right innovations. There are plenty of innovations, plenty of startups out there, and only a very small proportion is going to be successful in the long run, right? So with limited budgets, you have to be very careful and very particular in the way that you basically start like moving towards. And the same is as well to be problem solving focused, right? So not just like something to put in a nice to have, for example, something that's fancy but doesn't really solve a problem. You will have many of these, and there's more and more of these kind of things happening, especially nowadays, where you see all these kind of like helping tools that you have that create a bit illusion of having an actual solution, but not really a problem that you're solving with it, right? It's very much about this piece of understanding what the priorities are, and then you have a timeline basically with it. That's why I'm basically usually trying to say it's a strategy that's aligned from top and bottom. So it goes both ways. There is a strong alignment, strict alignment as well coming from the ISS boards, also defining on a global scale what the priorities are and what the strategy is. And at the same time as well, there is a feedback loop that comes from the countries that as well like aligns within the whole senior leadership team within the countries, and then loops back basically this kind of feedback to really understand where the pain points are. That's what I mentioned before, right? Because in the countries you're the closest to the customers, you won't be having always a complete like holistic view only from the top, but you really need to be on the ground to talk to different customers. You have global key accounts. you have key accounts, you have small, medium-sized companies. And that's a very different ballgame if you start like looking for solutions, because you can't always use the same kind of solutions that work for one customer. That is, for example, like let's call it, for example, a bank. And you have other sites that are much smaller. So the investment capabilities of customers are very different. And accordingly, you have to as well be flexible in the way how you solve issues with technology solutions to have the right solutions in place that are also affordable, right? So it goes it's a whole kind of like matrix that requires different aspects to consider, depending on the industry that you're serving, depending on the country and the service lines.
Yeah, you're spot on there, Zeljko. It's very important to have that top to bottom buy-in for such a strategy to be successful, right? Now, when you are in a transformation journey, it also requires a shift in mindset, right? The company culture, the way how people take it. There is always a resistance to change, right? Now, can you share a specific challenge you faced while driving such a change in an organization, and how did you overcome such a resistance?
A challenge. I believe you will always have a challenge, no matter your history, no matter your successes. That's at least my learning that I have had. So there is no guarantee to be successful just because you've been successful in the past. The whole thing is only to put down a strategy, to have a goal in mind that is aligned, obviously, as well. Have faith and be resistant, be resilient, right? Go that path. So the mindset shift is a very important one. So, for example, depending on the maturity of the organizations you come in, you will always have a different approach to those. How to change the mindset very much depends not on the overall, for example, like industry that you're in, not which country you're only in, but there are all cultural aspects, even religious aspects, right, that you have to consider to be able to be successful in changing a mindset. Because we have people who are like changing from different companies coming newly in, they're rather flexible in terms of the mindset. You have people who are since many, many decades with the company. And obviously, it's a bit more difficult then to move from something that you're used to do in the past successfully, right? And then to have to adjust or adapt or to believe in something that the new guys basically are trying to propose. You have my personal experience is looking as well a bit from my past. So in China, I always had the experience it was much, much easier to implement change and to drive it with the mindset, right? It comes a bit from the cultural perspective as well in China. You have a bit of a different kind of like expectation as well, and a bit more of following kind of like mindset or attitude. It will be, I think, very, very different and much more challenging as well if you go more to the Western hemisphere, where you have much more preparation work to do. You need much more buy-in and influencing to get everyone in the boat together to then make a more democratic decision, to have like kind of like a bigger group that then makes a decision. It takes more time, it is more effort, but that's basically the learning that I had. It very much depends on the country that you are in, on the region that you're in, the industry. So it's so many aspects that you have to consider. But again, you have to be open-minded. You have to try to also understand. And I think if you have this communication with the actual stakeholders, it will help a lot to make things easier and to understand where the potential pain points will be to change and to shift the mindset and the company culture in the end.
Yeah, true. The regional aspect, like you said, plays a key role in it, and the culture, right? Fantastic. So, Zeljko, looking ahead, I mean, what emerging technology or trend do you believe will have the most significant impact on customer experience and operational excellence in the next few years? Obviously, there is AI. So I would like to hear from you and your thoughts.
Yes, you mentioned AI. Everybody's talking about it. It's everywhere. It's finally mainstream, and everyone is literally using it right now. So it's a very broad topic. And looking where we are at the moment, especially coming from the facility management industry, so ISS is strongly, heavily investing in the IoT area sphere. So with the sensors, but at the same time as well, like to retrieve the data and what to do with the data, because that's going to be really a key element for our partners and customers to understand their environments, their buildings, their facilities, right? To have the sensor data, and this was the previous stage that we were in, and it has moved already in terms of like triggering certain events. But I think what's going to be much, much more common and state of the art is that IoT is the one piece, it's the sensory that comes in, the data that we collect, and eventually to not only have a dashboard that shows just what was recorded, but also to draw conclusions based on those. Not that I'm looking at the dashboard and making these conclusions, but that the AI drawing these conclusions and triggering events that eventually help as well to drive certain actions. Speed, for example, like a technician looking for an HVAC system before something fails, to, for example, go to bathrooms or to meeting rooms, to be predictive, prescriptive, to whatever happens, that you do not need always to wait till failure or to something, but rather to have this kind of like analytics piece to the whole thing. So I believe that's going to be a big one from an industrial perspective. We have seen it obviously in the private life, for example, Amazon or wherever you are, or Taobao, wherever you go shop, you have these proposals, repetitions, for example. People who have bought this also bought this. And this whole thing is moving more now as well into the B2B section, where this is going to be much more sellable, marketable, and also accepted by the companies with more trust basically into AI, and not just being the fancy buzzword that you see everywhere on the internet, on LinkedIn and these pages, but much more something that you really can leverage, that you can take as a value proposition together with other pieces. So it's a combination, what I'm trying to say, right? So we have IoT, we have AI, we will have very likely sooner than later augmented reality solutions as well, especially if you have still blue collar workers, if you have like people on the ground to look after things, to have certain operations, not to have to move to a digital device, which is running still with the mobile phone. But I think these interfaces will reduce. An interface to have to type something, an interface to have a cable or somewhere, right? So we have Bluetooth with many things, but as well, this whole channel of taking information in and to give information out. So that piece, I think, will be something that's going to be definitely changing in the near future. So that's what I'm seeing. It's also going to be a bit in the area of, obviously, with the topics, voice natural language processing will be something which will potentially cost jobs. We don't know yet, but it will also create so many more new opportunities and possibilities in the market, right? So I'm personally a believer that all these new fancy kind of solutions and tech solutions will rather help to create new different kind of positions and roles that we do not even anticipate at the moment, because it will change so much things that are only 2-3 steps that we have to first go through in the transformation and transition till we actually realize what the changes are going to be in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's going to be super exciting next few years in terms of the way things are shaping up. I think like computers, there are new transformative systems that are going to come in place, and the regular working environment is going to change again very soon. So Zeljko, the final question that I have in this particular segment is actually with your experience, right? What would you say is the most important lesson you have learned about leading digital transformation efforts that you would probably pass on to other CIOs and tech leaders?
All right. So number one, I mentioned earlier, having been successful in the past is not a guarantee to be successful in the future. That should not be demotivated. What I'm trying to say is have a clear goal in mind, have faith, be resilient, go with that thing, believe in it, because you will more than often have these hurdles in front of you. Nobody went straight through a transformation. It was always a challenge. You always will have conflict. It's a very natural thing, and it's part of the success story. There is no single truth or path to a successful transformation. And every transformation is very, very different. I always thought all my experience in the past I can use in the next role. And it's every time a very different kind of story. You have different people, you have a different culture, you have a different role, right, to start with. So it's always going to be about the other topics or the other strength and personal traits that you have, not the stuff that you learned in your studies or in your career before. You just have to have this kind of resilience and believe that the whole thing is going to go well. And it will eventually. Right? You have to just stick with it, go with it till the end, and things are going to work fine.
Fantastic. So Zeljko, before we finish our episode, we want to have a short rapid fire round, the triple strike, where we ask our guests 3 quirky questions and expect a fun answer to get a deeper glimpse into your minds, right? I have a few questions, Zeljko. So the first question, if you could have an unlimited supply of one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That's a good one. I'm thinking of creativity. Not sure if that counts.
Okay.
Creativity, because creativity would help so much to always have a plan B, C, D, E, F in petto. I think it's always important to have this kind of like possibility to switch around and to find a different solution, because as I mentioned before, you won't find a single one solution for everything, right? And I think that this creativity piece, sometimes we are having these non-creative phases, and those are really horrible, especially if you're under time pressure. So having, I think, an unlimited supply of creativity would be something I would really like.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really good one. So, Zeljko, the second question, if you could live the life of any animal for a day, which one would you choose?
That's an easy one. I think I've answered this question several times in my life. It was always eagle. I would like to fly, be above everything. And I think it would also reduce the need for meditation for me. But yeah, I think it's eagle.
Fantastic. I was thinking lion.
All right, okay.
Fantastic. So the last one. Is, would you rather be able to breathe underwater or fly? I think I know the answer. It's fly. You are eagle.
Pretty much spot on. That's an easy one. Yeah, and I explained why. So yes, pretty much fly, I think.
This is fantastic. Those are some great answers, Zeljko. Thank you so much once again for joining us today. It's truly been a pleasure hosting you and delving into these insightful discussions. Before we go, to our listeners, please tune into Digital Adoption Show to listen to more interesting, intriguing, and fun conversation with some of the top minds across the digital space. We are available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. So don't miss out on the latest episodes. Thank you once again.
Thank you.